The office was quiet that afternoon, with only the soft tapping of keyboards and the occasional shuffle of papers breaking the stillness. She sat at her desk, her hands poised over her keyboard, but her mind was elsewhere. A faint melody hummed in her head, one she had been carrying for days, one she couldn't shake even if she wanted to. She had always loved music more than anything else. It was her escape, her secret world where everything felt calm and right. Yet, in this office full of busy people and constant deadlines, music had no place. She could only hum softly under her breath, hoping no one noticed. Most days they didn't. Most days she was invisible, a quiet part of the background of office life. She liked it that way. She liked the quiet. She liked the small moments when she could lose herself in her imagination, play a song in her mind that only she could hear. She had been playing since she was little, though not in a formal, flashy way. Her parents had always encouraged her, but they could never afford music lessons. So she had taught herself, watching videos, reading books, listening to the radio, and spending hours alone with an old keyboard she had begged her mother to buy secondhand. She remembered the nights she had stayed up past bedtime, her fingers aching, her eyes tired, but her heart full, learning new songs and creating her own. Music had always been a safe place, a place where no one could judge her and where she could be free. On that particular day, she was lost in her thoughts when a voice called across the office. It was the manager, speaking with that mixture of urgency and excitement that made her stomach twist. "We have a problem for the event today," he said. "We need someone to play the piano and fast. Can anyone do it?" Her heart skipped a beat. The event. She had forgotten. The company was hosting important clients that afternoon, a gathering meant to impress and strengthen connections. Everything had to be perfect. She knew the office didn't expect much from the music. Most of the staff barely played an instrument. Music to them was just background noise. She felt a nervous flutter in her chest, a mix of fear and a strange thrill. She had never played in front of anyone important before. Her performances had always been private, safe, without pressure. All eyes turned to her. It was as if everyone had silently agreed she might be the one who could step in. She froze for a moment, unsure what to say. She could almost hear the whispers. "She's quiet, she never talks much. Can she even play?" The doubt from others was heavy, but what weighed more was her own fear. Could she do this? Could she turn her private world of music into something public? The manager waited, his eyes expectant. "Come on," he said. "We need someone now." She swallowed hard. Her fingers itched to play, her mind racing with memories of the time she had imagined herself in front of an audience. Yet she had never actually done it. She felt a sudden wave of panic. What if she messed up? What if the music sounded wrong? What if people laughed or judged her? Her palms grew sweaty and she felt her heart pound in her chest. Yet beneath the fear there was a spark. A tiny, stubborn spark of courage that whispered, "This is your moment. You've been waiting for this." It reminded her of the nights she had practiced alone, imagining an audience, imagining the joy of sharing something she loved. She had always dreamed of this, even if she hadn't dared to say it out loud. She stood slowly, her legs feeling heavier than usual. Each step toward the piano was a battle against the nervousness that threatened to hold her back. The office staff watched, some curious, some skeptical, some doubtful. She could feel their eyes on her, and it made her stomach twist, but she pushed forward, focusing on the familiar keys in front of her. The piano looked the same as it always did in the conference room, sturdy, polished, and waiting silently. But today it felt like it was alive, waiting for her touch, waiting to hear the music she had carried inside her for so long. As she sat down, she placed her fingers on the keys, hesitating for a moment. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm in her chest. Memories of her childhood floated up, her mother watching her practice in the tiny living room, her mentor encouraging her when she struggled with difficult notes, the feeling of accomplishment when she finally mastered a song. These memories steadied her. They reminded her that she had worked for this moment even if she didn't realize it. Her first notes were soft, almost uncertain. She barely dared to move her fingers, afraid of making a mistake. The sound echoed gently in the room. Some colleagues glanced up from their papers. Some whispered to each other, curiosity mingled with doubt. She felt a twinge of panic. What if this wasn't enough? What if it was terrible? She shook her head slightly, telling herself to focus, to listen to the music rather than the people around her. Slowly, the music began to flow. The notes became steadier, more confident. She let herself feel each sound, each vibration. letting it fill her, letting it carry her fear away. The melody she played was not just a song, it was a story, a piece of her heart that she had never shared with anyone. The office seemed to fade away, the chatter and the skepticism melting as her music filled the space. People began to notice. A few heads lifted and eyes that had been doubtful now watched with interest. There was something in the way she played, something genuine and full of emotion. It wasn't perfect in a technical sense, but it was beautiful in a way that could not be ignored. Her fingers danced over the keys, and with each note, she felt a little more alive, a little more sure of herself. The manager, who had initially called her over with urgency, stopped pacing and listened. The clients who had been checking their phones and whispering to each other grew quiet. Even those who had been skeptical from the beginning found themselves drawn into the sound. There was a subtle shift in the room, a transformation that no one had expected. She could feel it, and it made her chest swell with a mix of pride and relief. As she continued, she realized something important. This was not just about impressing others or filling a gap in the program. This was about sharing herself, about letting the world hear a part of her that had always been hidden. The nervousness she had felt moments ago began to fade, replaced by a calm focus. Her hands moved more naturally over the keys, her mind completely immersed in the music. The melody that had lived quietly in her mind for so long was now alive, unfolding in real time for everyone to hear. She felt a small smile tug at her lips. She was doing it. She was actually doing it. And the room, once filled with doubt and distraction, was now listening. The sound she created was connecting people in a way she had only imagined before. She could feel their attention, their curiosity, their emotion, and it made her feel powerful in a quiet, wonderful way. By the time the first part of her performance ended, there was a brief, almost imperceptible silence. People were processing what they had just heard, realizing that this quiet, unassuming woman had brought something unexpected and beautiful into the room. And then slowly a few claps began to rise, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. She opened her eyes, surprised to see the faces around her smiling, some even with tears glistening. For the first time that day, she felt seen, not for her office work or her quiet demeanor, but for who she truly was, for the talent and heart she had always carried inside her. She felt a surge of warmth and a quiet triumph. The fear she had felt moments ago was still there, but it was softened by the realization that she had done something meaningful, something that had touched others without her even trying too hard. She took another deep breath, preparing to continue the next part of the piece. The room had shifted. The atmosphere had changed. She could feel the energy around her, the curiosity and admiration mingling in the air. She knew that this moment was just the beginning. Something had started in that room, something that would not be forgotten quickly. And though she could not know what would come next, she felt ready more than ever to embrace it. The office that had seemed ordinary and routine that morning was now transformed by her music. She, who had always been quiet and unnoticed, had become the center of attention, not by demanding it, but by sharing something beautiful. And as her fingers hovered over the keys for the next note, she felt a deep, satisfying truth settle in her heart. This was where she belonged. Here in the middle of an ordinary office, she could make something extraordinary, and for the first time in a long time, she believed it. She paused for a moment, letting her hands rest lightly on the keys. The applause from the first part of her performance still echoed faintly in her ears, and she could feel her heart still racing. The sudden attention was new to her, and it made her slightly dizzy. Her mind tried to catch up with the reality of what was happening. Only minutes ago, she had been sitting quietly at her desk, invisible to almost everyone, humming a tune no one had heard. And now the same office that had never really noticed her was looking at her with admiration and curiosity. The feeling was strange, almost surreal. She closed her eyes briefly, taking a deep breath, trying to center herself. As she did, memories from her childhood came rushing back. She remembered the tiny living room where she had spent countless hours learning to play the piano. The room had been dimly lit by a small lamp, and the old wooden piano had creaked under her fingers. Her family didn't have much money, and music lessons were a luxury they could not afford, but she had loved it so much that she had taught herself. She remembered the nights she would stay up late, practicing when everyone else was asleep. The notes sometimes came easily, sometimes not at all. She could recall the frustration she had felt when a song seemed impossible, her small hands fumbling over the keys, But she also remembered the quiet triumph when she finally got it right. Each correct note, each melody she created felt like a small victory. Those nights had been lonely, but they had also been magical. In music, she had found a friend who never judged her, who never criticized her, who always listened and responded with beauty. Sometimes she remembered the teasing from other children, the mockery when she would hum a tune in the school hallway or try to share what she was learning. They didn't understand her love for music, and their laughter had stung. But she had learned to ignore it. She had learned that what mattered most was her own joy, her own dedication, and her own passion. That quiet strength, she realized now, had carried her to this very moment. Her fingers hovered over the piano again, and she let herself remember something else, her mentor. An old woman who had once taught her when she had managed to get a single lesson at a community center. The woman had seen something in her, something raw and unpolished but full of potential. She had encouraged her to practice daily, to feel the music, to put emotion into every note. "Don't worry about perfection," the mentor had said. "Play from your heart, and people will hear it." Those words had stayed with her, echoing in her mind today. Now, as she prepared to continue, she tried to quiet the nervousness in her chest. The room was no longer just a place of work. It was suddenly a stage. The people who had been skeptical were watching, and the clients, important and serious, were listening. The pressure could have crushed her, but instead she found a strange calm in remembering her past, in remembering why she loved music in the first place. It wasn't about showing off or proving herself. It was about sharing a part of herself, something genuine and real. She took a slow breath and let her hands move over the keys. The first notes were delicate, almost like a whisper. She didn't rush. She allowed each note to speak, to carry a little of her story. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was a conversation, a way to connect with the people in the room without words. As the melody grew, she felt a sense of release, as if she were letting go of years of fear and hesitation. Every note carried her courage forward, and with each chord her confidence grew. Around her, the room seemed to respond. The murmurs and whispers that had been present before had vanished. People leaned forward slightly in their chairs, their attention captured by the music. Even the manager, who had seemed so impatient earlier, now stood quietly at the side, watching, listening. The clients, who had been checking their watches and phones, were no longer distracted. Something in the music had caught them, something they could not ignore. It was not loud or flashy, but it had a presence, a sincerity that made people pause. Her mind drifted back to other moments in her life, small victories she had achieved in silence. She remembered the first time she had performed for her family, a simple song she had learned after weeks of practice. She had been terrified then, too, afraid of making mistakes, afraid of their reaction. But when the last note had played, their faces had lit up with genuine delight. That memory gave her strength now. She realized that no matter what happened in this room, she had already faced fear before and had come through it. She could do it again. The melody began to flow more freely now. She let herself get lost in it, her fingers moving naturally across the keys. She didn't think about how it sounded or whether it was perfect. She focused only on the feeling, on the story she wanted to tell. She imagined the people in the room, their expressions changing as they listened. She imagined them smiling, leaning closer, letting the music reach them. And as she played, she felt the magic of it, the way it could touch hearts without words. For a moment, she noticed a colleague at the back of the room who had always been critical of her work. He had crossed his arms and a skeptical look on his face when she started, but now his expression had softened. She caught his eyes, and for a brief second they shared an unspoken acknowledgement. The music was reaching him too. She realized that this was not just about her performance, it was about connection. Music had the power to reach people in ways words never could. Her mind wandered to the idea of the audience itself. These people had not expected anything remarkable from her. They had seen her as quiet, unassuming, a background presence. And now, with every note, she was showing them something they had not anticipated. But she didn't do it to prove them wrong. She did it because it was hers to give, because she had the ability to create something beautiful, something that could shift the energy in a room, even in a place as ordinary as an office. She felt a sense of freedom she had rarely experienced. The fear that had gripped her at the start was melting away, replaced by joy and focus. Each note she played felt like a small piece of her soul being shared with the world. She didn't need applause or recognition. The act of playing itself was enough. Yet she could not deny the quiet thrill she felt when she noticed the attention, the wonder, the awe in the faces around her. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not just for her work or her quiet presence, but for who she really was inside. The melody began to swell, building gently, then softly falling again. She experimented with dynamics, with tempo, letting her instincts guide her. She noticed subtle shifts in the room. A client leaning back, closing their eyes as if absorbing every sound. A colleague shifting forward in their seat, their skepticism gone, replaced by interest. She realized that the music was no longer just hers. It was theirs too. It belonged to everyone who listened and allowed themselves to feel it. She thought of her mentor again and imagined her smile. The old woman would have been proud, she knew. Proud not because of technical skill, but because of courage, heart, and honesty. The music was honest. It was pure and unfiltered. That thought gave her even more strength. She could feel the story of her life unfolding through each chord, each phrase, each pause, and the audience, though silent, was listening, sharing it with her in a way that words could never capture. A small ripple of sound broke her concentration momentarily. A dropped pen, a cough, but she let it pass. Nothing could distract her now. The music had taken on a life of its own, and she was merely a vessel. She felt a deep sense of peace in that moment, a certainty that she was doing exactly what she was meant to do. The office, the people, the clients, all of it faded around the edges. There was only the piano, the notes, and the feeling she was creating. As the piece progressed, she could sense the shift in energy more and more. The room that had been full of doubt and indifference was now alive with attention. People were leaning in, unconsciously moving closer, opening themselves to the experience. Even the manager, who had seemed anxious moments before, now had a relaxed expression. She realized that this was the true power of music, not just to entertain, but to transform, to change the way people feel, even in the most ordinary of settings. Finally, as she reached the softer ending of the piece, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Gratitude for the years of practice, for the quiet moments of dedication, for the memories of her mentor, for the small victories that had prepared her for this moment. She realized that every struggle, every doubt, every lonely night had led her here, and in that realization she felt complete. When she lifted her hands from the keys, there was a silence, but it was different now. It was not awkward or hesitant. It was filled with the energy of the music she had shared, with the emotions she had poured into it. People looked at her with admiration and wonder, some with smiles, some with tears glistening. The applause that followed was louder this time, more heartfelt, and she allowed herself to feel proud without shame. She had faced her fear, shared her heart, and touched the hearts of others. And in that moment she knew that this was only the beginning. There were more notes to play, more stories to tell, more ways to transform the world, one melody at a time. The applause had settled into a soft murmur, but the energy in the room remained. She sat at the piano, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, listening to the hum of appreciation around her. For a moment, she let herself simply breathe, letting the warmth of the moment wash over her. It was unlike anything she had ever felt before. The attention, the awe, the quiet admiration, it was overwhelming yet comforting. She realized that people were no longer just watching. They were waiting, holding their breath, eager for the next sound she would create. Her mind began to wander back to the hours of preparation she had never shared with anyone. She remembered the countless afternoons spent at home, her small fingers pressing the keys, her eyes tracing the sheet music she had borrowed from the library or found online. She had learned to play not for recognition, but because music was part of her. It was her companion in moments of loneliness, her voice when words failed, her escape from the challenges of everyday life. And now that private world was no longer just hers. She was sharing it, and she could feel the connection stretching across the room, touching everyone present. She started to play again, this time with more confidence. The notes flowed smoothly, carrying a melody that was both gentle and powerful. She allowed herself to feel every emotion as she played, letting joy, nostalgia, and even a touch of sadness infuse the music. It was no longer just a song. It was a story, a conversation without words. Her fingers moved with ease, guided by instinct and memory, and she felt a sense of liberation she had never experienced. Each chord seemed to resonate not just in the room but in her own chest, reminding her of why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. As the melody grew, she noticed small reactions in the audience. A client sitting near the back had closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. A colleague who had often been impatient and dismissive now leaned forward, captivated by the notes. Even the manager, who had seemed tense at the start, was smiling quietly, nodding along with the rhythm. She felt a quiet thrill in realizing that her music was reaching people who had once ignored her, people who had not expected anything remarkable. And yet she wasn't doing this for them. She was doing it for the music itself, letting it guide her, letting it tell her story. Her thoughts drifted again, this time to a moment from her school days. She remembered being part of a small recital, one of the few times she had performed in front of an audience. She had been terrified, her hands shaking as she approached the piano. But when she began to play, something magical had happened. The fear faded, replaced by a focus and clarity she hadn't known she possessed. She remembered the way the audience had quieted, listening intently to every note. That experience had stayed with her for years, a reminder that music had the power to change the mood of a room, to draw people together, to create a shared experience. And now she was living that memory again, but on a larger scale, in a place that had seemed so ordinary before. Her fingers danced across the keys, shifting effortlessly between soft, delicate passages and louder, more dramatic chords. She could feel the story unfolding in her hands, a story of struggle and triumph, of quiet strength and hidden talent. The room seemed to respond to her every movement. People leaned closer, their attention fixed entirely on her and the music. There were no distractions now, no side conversations, no glances at phones. For the first time that day, everyone was present in the moment, united by the sound she was creating. She noticed a subtle change in herself as well. The nervousness that had gripped her earlier was almost gone. Her heart still raced, but it was no longer with fear. It was excitement, anticipation, and a deep sense of purpose. She realized that she had entered a state where the music and her emotions were one. She didn't have to think about the audience, about expectations, or about whether she was performing correctly. She just had to let the music flow, and it would reach the people in the room in its own way. Her mind wandered to her mentor again. She imagined the woman's kind eyes and encouraging smile. The words she had spoken years ago echoed in her mind. Play from your heart and people will hear it. At the time, she hadn't fully understood what that meant. Now she did. Playing from the heart wasn't just about technical skill. It was about honesty, vulnerability, and connection. And she could feel that connection now, flowing from her through the piano into the room, into the hearts of everyone who was listening. As she continued, she allowed herself to explore the melody more freely. She added small flourishes, subtle changes in tempo, and variations in volume, letting her instincts guide her. The music became alive, breathing and moving in a way that felt almost independent of her own control. She felt a thrill in discovering new ways to express herself through the piano, new ways to communicate without words. Each note carried meaning, each chord told a story, and she felt an incredible sense of fulfillment in sharing it. She glanced briefly at the faces around her. There was a mixture of emotions, surprise, admiration, even a touch of awe. Some people had their eyes closed, completely absorbed, while others leaned forward, trying to take in every detail. She realized that in that moment, the room had become something extraordinary. What had started as an ordinary office event had transformed into an experience, a shared journey guided by music. And she was at the center of it, not because she sought attention, but because she had the courage to let her talent shine. Her thoughts drifted again, this time to the challenges she had faced in life. She remembered moments of self-doubt, times when she had questioned whether she was good enough, whether her love for music mattered. She remembered the times she had been overlooked, ignored, or underestimated. And now, in this room full of people, she realized that none of that mattered anymore. Her music spoke louder than any words could. It proved that dedication, passion, and authenticity could create something powerful, even in the most unlikely circumstances. The melody shifted again, moving into a softer, more reflective passage. She allowed herself to slow down, to linger on each note, to savor the sound and the feeling it created. The room responded in kind. The air seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next sound. People were leaning in, holding back from even moving, as if afraid to break the spell she had cast. She could feel the weight of the moment, the delicate balance between silence and sound, between expectation and surprise. and she reveled in it. She thought of the future, of all the possibilities that had opened up because of this performance. Perhaps it was just one event, one afternoon, but it could be the beginning of something larger. She could see herself playing for more people, sharing her music with a wider audience, connecting with others in ways she had never imagined. But she pushed those thoughts aside for now. The present was all that mattered. The music, the room, the people, the story she was telling. That was enough. Her hands moved faster now, guided by intuition and memory. The melody grew more complex, more intricate, yet it never lost its emotional core. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful. She could feel the attention of the room sharpening, the energy rising. The clients, who had initially been distracted and unsure, were now completely absorbed. The staff, who had sometimes overlooked her presence, were leaning forward, watching in awe. And she realized that this was the true power of music, the ability to transform, to bring people together, to create a shared experience that was felt, not just seen. She noticed a subtle smile on one of the colleagues who had often been critical. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there, and it gave her a quiet sense of validation, not because she needed approval, but because it showed that music could reach even the most skeptical hearts. She allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, then returned her focus to the keys, letting the story continue. The music began to build again, gradually growing in intensity. She allowed herself to add flourishes, to experiment with rhythm, to let her creativity flow. The sound filled the room, surrounding everyone in a cocoon of melody. She felt a deep sense of joy, a sense of being alive in a way that words could never capture. Each chord, each note, each pause was a reflection of her journey, her struggles, her triumphs. And as she played, she felt a connection not only to the audience but to herself, to the person she had always been beneath the quiet exterior. Finally, as she reached a gentle, flowing conclusion to this part of the piece, she felt a wave of calm. Her heart was still beating quickly, but it was a satisfying, contented rhythm. She allowed herself to pause, to take in the room, to notice the faces around her. There were smiles, soft claps, and even a few tears. The atmosphere had changed completely. What had begun as an ordinary office gathering had transformed into something special, something memorable, something that would linger in the minds of everyone present. She leaned back slightly, her fingers still resting on the keys, and allowed herself a small smile. She had done it. She had shared her music, her story, and her heart with others. And in doing so, she had created a moment that mattered, a moment that no one would forget. For the first time, she understood that her gift was not just about talent. It was about courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to share herself with the world. The room was silent for a few moments, letting the impact of the music settle. And then slowly the applause began again, louder this time, more heartfelt. People were clapping not just out of politeness, but because they had been moved. She allowed herself to feel the warmth of it, the pride and the satisfaction. This was a moment she would remember forever, a turning point that would shape the way she saw herself and her music. And as the last echoes of the melody faded, she knew that the story was far from over. There were more notes to play, more emotions to share, more ways to touch hearts. But for now, she let herself savor the moment, the feeling of connection, the power of music to transform a room and everyone in it. She sat at the piano, letting the energy of the room sink in. The applause from the earlier sections of her performance had faded, but the warmth of attention still lingered. She could feel eyes following her every move, some curious, some skeptical at first, now filled with anticipation. She took a deep breath, feeling her fingers hover above the keys. For a moment, time seemed to slow. She thought about what she was about to do next. This part of the music would be more expressive, more emotional, a chance to show not only skill but heart. She could feel the weight of expectation, but it no longer frightened her. Instead, it energized her. Her fingers began to move softly at first, then with increasing confidence. The melody started to flow naturally, weaving through gentle rises and falls, carrying a sense of story. She thought about her own life as she played, the moments of solitude spent practicing late at night, the years of quietly building her skill, the times she had been ignored or underestimated. All of it was here in her fingers, all of it shaping every note. Each chord she struck was like a small declaration. She existed, she mattered, and her music could touch hearts. As she played, she noticed the subtle shifts in the room. The office that had been filled with mundane conversations and distracted glances was now fully present, captivated by the music. People leaned forward, their eyes fixed on her hands moving gracefully over the keys. Some closed their eyes, letting themselves be carried away by the melody. The manager, usually so tense and hurried, stood quietly at the side, a calm expression on his face, completely absorbed. Even the most critical clients, who had initially been focused on their schedules and meetings, were now listening intently, drawn into the emotion of each note. She allowed herself to relax further, letting her emotions guide her playing. This section of the piece demanded more expression, more courage, more vulnerability. She let herself feel joy, nostalgia, and even a trace of sadness, allowing each emotion to influence the music. The melody became richer, more textured as she added subtle variations and dynamics. The music was no longer simply a performance. It was a conversation, a connection, a bridge between her world and everyone else in the room. Her mind drifted back to her mentor, the woman who had once told her that music should come from the heart. She imagined her gentle smile and the encouragement she had always given. Those words echoed in her mind now. Play from your heart and people will hear it. She understood it more clearly than ever. It wasn't about perfect technique or flawless execution. It was about honesty and courage, and she felt that honesty in every note, letting it resonate with the audience. She could feel their attention and their emotions in return, as if the music were a thread connecting them all. The melody began to swell, carrying a sense of rising tension and excitement. She shifted her hands across the keys, exploring the full range of sound. The soft, gentle passages gave way to stronger, more forceful chords, each one deliberate and filled with intention. She could feel the room responding to her. People leaned closer, unconsciously holding their breath, fully immersed in the music. She felt the energy of the audience mingling with her own, creating something almost tangible in the air. The experience was exhilarating, and she let herself be carried away by it. She remembered the small triumphs of her past, the first time she had played a piece perfectly, the first time someone had complimented her skill, the quiet pride she had felt when she realized that practice and dedication could lead to something meaningful. Those memories gave her strength now. She realized that everything she had gone through, the doubt, the loneliness, the persistence, had prepared her for this very moment. The music she played was not only a reflection of her talent, but also a testament to her resilience and determination. The room seemed to transform further with each passing moment. The ordinary office space, once filled with desks, computers, and scattered papers, now felt like a concert hall. The air was charged with emotion, the atmosphere alive with anticipation and wonder. People were no longer just listening, they were experiencing. She could sense the emotions of others shifting, from skepticism and distraction to awe and admiration. Even those who had been cynical at first were now fully engaged. Leaning in to catch every nuance of her playing, she allowed herself to experiment more freely, adding small flourishes, unexpected pauses, and variations in rhythm. Each addition felt natural, born from instinct rather than calculation. She trusted herself completely, knowing that the music would communicate what words could not. As she played, she felt a profound sense of connection, not just with the audience, but with the music itself. It was as if the piano had become an extension of her soul, translating her deepest thoughts and emotions into sound. Her eyes wandered briefly across the room. She noticed a colleague who had often doubted her abilities sitting upright, eyes wide, completely absorbed. She caught a client leaning back in their chair, closing their eyes, letting the music wash over them. She saw subtle smiles, quiet nods, and expressions of wonder. The realization struck her. The music was not only captivating them, it was touching them. It was creating a shared moment, one that transcended the ordinary, one that they would remember long after this day was over. She felt a sense of liberation as the music continued to flow. The fear and self-doubt that had gripped her earlier were completely gone, replaced by a feeling of exhilaration. She was no longer simply performing. She was communicating, sharing a piece of herself, and witnessing the impact of that sharing in real time. Each chord, each melody, each subtle variation carried meaning. She realized that this was the essence of her gift, the ability to create something that moved others, to transform a space, to make ordinary moments extraordinary. The music shifted again, Moving into a softer, more introspective passage, she let her fingers linger on each note, savoring the sound and the feeling it created. The room responded accordingly. There was a profound silence, not of emptiness but of attention and respect. People held their breath, captivated as if afraid to disturb the fragile beauty of the moment. She felt a surge of pride and gratitude. The connection between her and the audience was real, tangible, and powerful. It reminded her why she had dedicated so much of her life to music, why she had persevered despite challenges and doubts. She thought of her childhood again, of the countless nights she had spent practicing alone, the moments of frustration and triumph, the quiet joy of mastering a difficult piece. Those experiences had shaped her, taught her patience, resilience, and the importance of dedication. And now all of that history, all of that effort, was converging in this performance. The music she created was not just a series of notes. It was a reflection of her journey, a narrative of her growth and perseverance, and a testament to the power of passion and dedication. The melody began to rise again, building toward a climactic section. She allowed herself to fully immerse in the sound, letting her emotions guide her. The notes flowed effortlessly, rising and falling, creating a sense of drama and anticipation. She noticed the audience leaning in, their attention fully captured, their reactions mirroring the intensity of the music. She realized that she had succeeded in transforming the room, not just physically but emotionally. The ordinary office space had become a place of wonder, of shared experience, of connection. Her hands moved faster now, exploring the full range of the piano, experimenting with dynamics, rhythm, and expression. Each chord struck with purpose, each pause deliberate. She could feel the room vibrating with the energy of the music, the collective attention of everyone present. It was as if time itself had slowed, allowing this moment to stretch and expand, to become something larger than the sum of its parts. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, a sense of being fully alive in a way she had never experienced before. She glanced again at the faces around her. There were smiles, nods, and tears, subtle expressions of wonder and appreciation. Even the most critical individuals seemed affected, their skepticism replaced by awe. She felt a quiet satisfaction in realizing that her music had reached everyone, regardless of their initial doubts. It reminded her that true artistry was not about seeking approval, but about sharing something meaningful, something that could touch hearts and create lasting impact. As the piece approached its final section, she allowed herself to slow down, to savor each note, to linger on the beauty of the sound. The room held its breath, every person present absorbed in the experience. She felt a sense of triumph, not in the sense of winning or impressing, but in the quiet knowledge that she had shared a part of herself, that she had created a moment of genuine connection. The music, she realized, was no longer hers alone. It belonged to the room, to the people who had listened, to the shared experience they had all created together. When the final chord resonated, there was a brief, profound silence. The room seemed to exhale collectively, as if letting go of the magic it had absorbed. And then slowly the applause began. It was louder, more heartfelt, more genuine than before. People were clapping not just out of politeness, but out of admiration and appreciation for the courage, talent, and heart she had shown. She allowed herself to smile, to feel the warmth and pride that came from knowing she had created something extraordinary. She leaned back slightly, letting her fingers rest on the keys, and took a deep breath. She could feel her heart still racing, but it was a satisfying, contented rhythm. The room had been transformed, not by speeches or presentations, but by music, by emotion, by the courage to share something personal and beautiful. She realized in that moment that she had not only performed, she had connected, inspired, and created a memory that would linger long after the event was over. And as she looked around, taking in the faces of the people who had once doubted her, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had faced her fears, embraced her gift, and shared it in a way that had transformed not just the room but herself. The experience had taught her something invaluable, that the true power of music, and of any passion, lay in the courage to share it, the honesty to let it speak, and the willingness to touch hearts without expectation. The applause was still echoing in the room when she slowly lifted her hands from the keys. Her chest felt full, her heart pounding with a mix of relief, pride, and an unexpected exhilaration. She looked around, taking in the faces of the people who had been silent just moments before. Their expressions were different now, Eyes wide, mouths slightly open, some smiling, some teary, all of them captivated. The energy in the room had shifted completely. It was no longer the mundane office gathering she had walked into hours ago. It had become a space alive with emotion, connected by the music she had shared. She leaned back in her chair for a moment, letting herself absorb the reality of what had just happened. It was hard to believe that only a few hours ago she had been sitting quietly at her desk, invisible to most people. No one had expected her to play, and yet here she was, having transformed the room without saying a word. The thought made her chest tighten with gratitude. She realized how much courage it had taken just to say yes when the manager asked her to perform. The fear, the self-doubt, and the nervousness had all been worth it. She had done more than play a song. She had shared a piece of herself. People began to approach her one by one, their smiles genuine and their praise heartfelt. A client who had been stern and reserved earlier shook her hand warmly, saying, "That was incredible. I've never heard anything like it." A colleague who had always been competitive and skeptical now looked at her with admiration and said quietly, "You were amazing. I had no idea you could play like that." Even the manager, who had been pacing nervously earlier, approached her, his expression soft and impressed. "I didn't know you had this in you," he said. "You've changed the whole atmosphere today." "Thank you." She felt a strange mixture of humility and pride. She had never played for recognition, but the warmth of these reactions touched her deeply. It was not just about being seen or praised, it was about the connection she had created, the shared experience that had moved people in a way words could not. She realized that this moment was more than just a personal triumph. It was a reminder that when someone dares to share their talent, their passion, and their heart, it can ripple out and affect others profoundly. As people continued to speak to her, she noticed that some were quietly reflecting on the music, their expressions thoughtful, almost mesmerized. A client whispered to another, saying, "I didn't expect this. It's more than music. It's emotion." Another colleague, usually quick to criticize, had tears in their eyes, nodding as they watched her. She realized that her music had not just entertained them, it had touched them, reaching a place deeper than simple applause or polite recognition. And that realization filled her with a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. Every late night spent practicing alone, every small victory in her childhood, every moment of doubt and persistence. It had all led to this. The music she played today was the culmination of years of quiet dedication, and now it had finally found its audience. The thought made her smile. She understood that talent alone was never enough. Courage, perseverance, and authenticity were what allowed her music to resonate, to reach people's hearts. She glanced around the room and saw subtle signs of transformation in the people who had been present. Conversations that had been tense or distracted earlier were now lighter, warmer. People were exchanging smiles and glances, their moods subtly lifted by the experience. She realized that the music had done more than create a moment of personal achievement. It had changed the room itself. The office space felt brighter, fuller, more alive. And she felt proud knowing that she had been the one to bring that change. The manager asked her to sit down again, suggesting she play one more piece before the event ended. She hesitated for a moment, thinking about whether she should continue, but then she realized that the opportunity to share more of herself was rare. She nodded and the room quieted once again. She placed her fingers on the keys, allowing herself to be guided by instinct and emotion rather than nerves. The next piece began softly, a gentle, flowing melody that gradually grew in depth and expression. As she played, she noticed people leaning closer, some closing their eyes, letting themselves be carried by the music. There was a quiet awe in the room, a reverence for the way sound could transform feelings and perceptions. She allowed herself to fully immerse in the music, feeling each note resonate not just in the room but inside herself. This was more than performance. It was storytelling, connection, and liberation all at once. She realized that her music was a bridge, linking herself to the audience in a way words never could. Her mind drifted back to the small piano she had once practiced on as a child, the nights she had spent alone learning songs, the quiet triumphs and frustrations. She remembered the mentor who had believed in her, who had encouraged her to play from her heart. Those lessons had never been about technique alone. They had been about courage, honesty, and emotion. And now, as she played for this audience, she felt that lesson fully realized. Each note was a reflection of her journey, a story that had been waiting to be told, and she was finally letting it be heard. The melody swelled, carrying a sense of hope and renewal. She felt a wave of confidence and joy wash over her. The audience responded instinctively, leaning into the music, reacting to the rises and falls of the melody, the gentle pauses, the bursts of intensity. Even those who had been skeptical or distracted were captivated now, their attention fully on her and the music. She felt a deep connection with everyone in the room, as if the boundaries between performer and listener had dissolved. She realized that this was more than just a personal achievement. It was a transformation of the moment itself. The office, the clients, the colleagues, the ordinary space where people had come to conduct business. It had been transformed by music, by heart, by the courage to share something real. And she had been the catalyst. That realization made her chest swell with gratitude. She understood that her gift was not just for herself. It was meant to be shared, to impact others, to create lasting impressions. As the piece neared its conclusion, she let the notes flow with intention and feeling. The room was completely silent, every person present absorbed, almost holding their breath. She felt the weight of the moment, the collective energy of the audience, the resonance of the music, and she allowed herself to feel pride, not boastful or arrogant, but quiet, deep pride in having faced fear, embraced her gift, and transformed an ordinary space into something extraordinary. When the last chord rang out, there was a profound silence, a moment of pause where everyone seemed to savor what they had just experienced. And then slowly applause began again, louder, more heartfelt than ever. People were clapping not out of habit, but because they had been touched, moved, inspired. She allowed herself to smile, a genuine, unguarded smile, feeling the warmth of the moment wash over her. She had not only shared music, she had shared herself, and the effect had been remarkable. People began approaching her again, their words filled with admiration and gratitude. "That was incredible," one person said. "I've never felt something like this in a meeting before." Another whispered, "You have a gift. Don't ever stop playing." The manager looked at her with pride, saying, "You've done something today that none of us will forget. You've brought life to this room in a way that words never could." Each interaction reminded her of the impact she had made, the lives she had touched, the atmosphere she had changed. She realized that this was only the beginning. The courage she had found to play that day, to share her talent openly, had opened doors she hadn't even imagined. Perhaps it would lead to more performances, more opportunities to connect with people through her music. Perhaps it would simply be a turning point in her life, a moment when she realized her own worth and the power of her gift. Whatever the future held, she knew that today had changed her forever. As the room slowly returned to normal, people chatting quietly and moving about, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced her fears, embraced her talent, and created something beautiful. The ordinary office, once dull and routine, had been transformed into a place of shared emotion, connection, and wonder. And she had been at the center of it all, not seeking recognition, but simply being herself, sharing her music, and trusting in the power of her own heart. She sat for a moment longer, letting the echoes of the music linger. The room had shifted, the people had shifted, and she had shifted as well. She realized that her life would never be the same after this day. She had discovered a new confidence, a new sense of purpose, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to share her gift.